When that barn door closed behind me, I'd stop breathing. The sound of his heavy breathing near my ear was like a noose tightening around my neck. For years, that man stole my breath, until one day I stole his forever. Good afternoon, my dear viewers. What a joy to speak with you today. My name is Janine Sanders. I'm 78 years old and blessed with a full life, and I live here in Millbrook, Nebraska, a small town that embraced me when I desperately needed a fresh start. I was born in Riverdale, also here in Nebraska, but life brought me to Millbrook almost 5 decades ago. These days, my life is peaceful. After retiring from the fabric store where I worked for more than 20 years, I find joy in conversations with my friends and neighbors. Every day, after the sun begins to set and the heat eases a bit, we gather in the church square. Sometimes at Irene's house, other times at Nancy's. Our little group started small, with 3 or 4 ladies, and today we're almost 15. What do we do most? Well, we talk about everything. About life, about children who grew up and moved away, about grandchildren who visit, and mostly, we share our stories. Real-life stories of overcoming hardship. That's how our custom started. I was going through a difficult time after my youngest son moved to Lincoln. The house was so empty that the silence hurt my ears. It was Nancy who knocked on my door one afternoon and said, "Janine, stop crying in corners. Come have coffee at my house. There are others like you who need good conversation." And that's how it began. At first, it was just coffee and unimportant gossip. But one day, Zelma started telling us how she had overcome her husband's death and raised her children alone. It was so beautiful, so moving, that the following week, another friend shared her story too. Before I knew it, it was my turn. And I discovered that sharing that weight I'd carried for so many years, was like taking a stone off my back. Now every Saturday, someone shares a deeper story. And let me tell you, there are stories there worthy of a movie. Resilience, strength, courage. Those ladies who seem so fragile have weathered storms that many young people couldn't endure. And that's what made me want to share my story with you, too. Because maybe there's someone out there who needs to hear that it's possible to survive, to breathe again after feeling like the air has run out. Today, my little house is simple but cozy. I have my plants in the yard, my dog Toby, whom I adopted when he was already old like me, and of course, I have my friends. The pain never completely disappears, but we learn to carry it differently, in a way that doesn't hurt so much. We understand that our scars are marks of battles we've won. And you, my dear viewers, tell me in the comments, which small town are you watching from? Is it early morning with your coffee, after lunch, or as night falls? I read all comments and feel so happy knowing where you're from and when you take time from your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Let me know, okay? Let's create a chain of affection and strength. Before I continue, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel. It's just one little click, but it makes all the difference so more people can hear these stories and perhaps find a little comfort and hope. I'll start my story going back many years when I was still a girl in Riverdale. A time that should have been filled with joy and discovery, but which turned into a nightmare when a man entered our home and changed everything. A man who arrived bringing smiles, but who hid something terrible behind those white teeth. Something I would only discover when that heavy door of the barn behind our house closed behind me. I was born and raised in Riverdale, a riverside town in Nebraska, along the Missouri River. It was a simple life, but full of joy. My father, Joseph Sanders, worked as a fisherman and sometimes as a boatman, transporting goods from one place to another. My mother, Dorothy, or Dottie, as everyone called her, took care of the house and sold embroidery she made herself. There were 4 of us siblings, me, the youngest, Gerald, the oldest, Olivia and Eugene, the middle ones. Our house was a bit away from the town center, almost at the riverside. It was a simple wooden house with a large yard in front where chickens pecked all day long. In the back, there was a garden my mother tended with such care, and further back, at the end of the yard, was an old barn. In those days, the barn was just a place where my father stored his fishing nets, some work materials, and we children sometimes played hide and seek. It was a common place that didn't cause me any fear. My childhood was like any small-town child's in the 40s and 50s. I played in the street with other children, swam in the river, hidden from my mother, who was afraid we'd drown, went to Goodwill Elementary School, which was about a 20-minute walk from our house. I remember Mrs. Olympia well, a serious but kind-hearted lady who taught me to read and write with such patience. I loved going to school. It was my favorite place in the world. At home, the routine was always the same. We woke up early with the rooster's crow. My mother was already up, lighting the wood stove to make coffee. My father left to fish before the sun rose, taking his gear and some food my mother prepared. We children helped with household chores before going to school. I liked helping my mother with the embroidery. She taught me from an early age, and I had a natural skill with the needle. After school, we played until sunset. The games were simple: tag, circle games, cornhusk dolls for the girls, slingshots, and tops for the boys. My best friend was Clarice, daughter of the owner of the only general store on our street. We spent hours making up stories and dreaming about the future. She wanted to be a teacher. I dreamed of having a fabric and clothing store someday. At night, after dinner, my father liked to sit on the porch and tell stories. Fishermen's tales, legends of the river country, stories he heard on his boat trips. We children sat around him, hypnotized by his deep voice and the gleam in his eyes when he talked about the river and the mysteries it held. But this peaceful life began to change when I was 11. It was 1958, I remember, as if it were yesterday. My father suddenly fell ill. A fever that wouldn't break, a cough that took his breath away. Tuberculosis, the doctors said. At that time, it was almost a death sentence. He fought for a few months, wasting away day by day until one winter dawn, my mother woke us up crying. He had passed during the night, in silence, as if he didn't want to bother anyone with his departure. The months that followed were difficult. My mother tried to maintain the house alone, selling her embroidery and washing clothes for others. My oldest brother, Gerald, at only 16, took over my father's work, fishing and doing odd jobs around town. But it was barely enough to buy food. The bills piled up, and the fear of losing our home grew each day. It was during this time that Arnold Mendez appeared in our lives. He was a widower, about 15 years older than my mother, and had a small business in town. He began to frequent our house, bringing groceries, helping financially, being kind to all of us. He was a large man with calloused hands and an easy smile. He always wore a well-pressed shirt, even on the hottest days, and had a way of looking at my mother that made her blush like a girl. With time, he became a constant presence in our house. My mother seemed to rejuvenate when he was around. She laughed more, hummed while cooking, fixed her hair more carefully. It was good to see her like this after so much suffering. My brothers also liked him. Arnold taught practical things to the boys: how to fix a fence, how to negotiate merchandise, how to behave around adults. For Olivia, he brought hair ribbons and sometimes even new fabric for a dress. With me at first, he was kind too. He praised my embroidery, said I had talent like my mother. He brought candy hidden in his pockets and gave it to me when no one was looking, with a conspiratorial wink. "It's our little secret," he would say, and I felt special having a secret with this man who was saving our family. But there was something in his gaze that bothered me. When he thought no one was watching, his eyes changed. They became cold, calculating, especially when he looked at me. A shiver ran down my spine when our eyes met in these moments. But I pushed those thoughts away. He was helping my family, making my mother smile again. Who was I to distrust him? The wedding happened less than a year after my father's death. It was a simple ceremony in the small St. Louis church, with few guests. My mother wore a light blue dress, the best she had, and smiled nervously like a first-time bride. Arnold was elegant in his dark suit, hair well combed back, the strong lavender cologne filling the entire church. Soon after, he moved into our house. Things improved financially. We never lacked food again. Bills were paid on time. We even got new clothes. Arnold renovated the house, replaced the leaking roof, fixed the windows that wouldn't close properly. And he paid special attention to the barn at the back of the yard. He replaced the rotten boards, put in a new door with a sturdy bolt, reorganized everything inside. "It's my little corner," he would say. "Every man needs a place of his own, where he can think, work with his hands, be a little alone." My mother respected this space, and we children were forbidden to play there. The barn now belonged exclusively to Arnold. The first year with him in the house was peaceful, or at least it seemed to be. But when I turned 12, I began to notice subtle changes in his behavior, the way he looked at me when my mother wasn't around. How he found excuses to touch me. A pat on the shoulder that lasted a second too long, a hand that fixed my hair unnecessarily, fingers that brushed my arm when he passed me something. Perhaps that's why I started to avoid him, staying at school longer, at Clarice's house, anywhere that wasn't near him. But that only made things worse. He began to control my schedules, to ask where I was, who I talked to. "I'm just taking care of you," he would tell my mother when she questioned his strictness with me. "A girl that age needs a firm hand. The world is full of dangers." Little did my mother know that the danger was under our own roof, waiting for the right moment to attack. It was a few months after my 13th birthday when everything really started. It was summer in Riverdale, one of those suffocating Nebraska summers when the air seems too dense to breathe. Our house, even close to the river, didn't escape that heat that sticks to your skin like molasses. I remember it was a Sunday. My mother had gone to church with Olivia and Eugene. Gerald, who was already 18, had gone out with friends to fish further up the river. I stayed home because I had a strong headache since the night before. "Rest, my daughter," my mother said before leaving. "When I get back, I'll make you some lemon balm tea." Arnold stayed too. He told my mother he was going to fix some things in the barn. "I need to organize some tools," he explained. "It's going to be noisy. Better if you're not home." I was lying in the hammock on the porch, trying to find some relief from the heat, when he approached after everyone left. He was wearing a white button-up shirt, sleeves rolled up showing strong arms, hair combed back, damp with sweat. His eyes had that gleam I already knew and feared. "Janine," he called in his deep voice, "I need your help in the barn. There are some boxes that are too heavy for me to lift alone." My entire body froze, despite the heat. "But I have a headache, Mr. Arnold," I tried to evade. "Mom said I should rest." He took a step forward, the smile disappearing from his lips. "Your mother isn't here now, is she? And I'm asking for help. It's the least you can do, after everything I've done for this family." Those words hit me like a punch. It was true. He had saved our family from poverty. We had a debt of gratitude to him. Who was I to deny a simple request for help? Reluctantly, I got up and followed him to the barn. The path never seemed so long. We passed by my mother's garden, where the strong smell of rosemary mixed with the sweet aroma of orange blossoms. Further on, the chickens pecked lazily, sheltered in the shade of the mango tree, and there at the back, solitary and imposing, was the barn. It was a simple construction, of wood already aged by time and rain. But since Arnold had renovated it, it had gained a new door, robust, with a heavy bolt that locked from the inside. The small windows, only two, now had fine wire screens that prevented insects from entering, but also limited the passage of air, making the interior even more stifling. Arnold opened the door and gestured for me to enter first. A strong smell of wood, machine oil, and something I couldn't identify, something between mold and sweat, invaded my nostrils. The interior was in semi-darkness, illuminated only by the weak light entering through the screened windows. "Come in," he insisted, his voice now lower, almost a whisper. "The boxes are at the back." I took a few hesitant steps into the barn. It was a spacious place, but claustrophobic at the same time. On the walls, tools of all types hung from hooks: hammers, saws, pliers, screwdrivers. On the floor, sacks of grain were piled in a corner, along with bales of hay that Arnold used to make repairs to the roof. In the center was a wooden workbench, where he usually worked. "Where are the boxes?" I asked, my voice sounding strangely high-pitched. That's when I heard the sound that would haunt me for decades: the bolt being slid, the door closing with a dull thud. The air inside the barn immediately seemed thinner, as if someone had sucked out all the oxygen. "There are no boxes, Janine," Arnold said, his voice completely transformed. It was no longer the cordial tone of the man who helped my mother. It was something visceral, primitive. "I just wanted to talk to you. Alone." I felt the blood freeze in my veins. I turned slowly to face him, hands trembling, heart beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. Arnold was standing between me and the door, blocking my only escape route. "You know, Janine," he continued, taking a step in my direction, "you're growing up, becoming a pretty young lady, just like your mother when she was young." I retreated until I felt the wooden workbench against my back. There was nowhere to go. "Mr. Arnold, Mom will be back soon. She'll be worried if she doesn't find me at home." He laughed, a dry laugh that had nothing of joy. "Your mother won't be back for at least 2 hours. Father Oliver is famous for his long sermons, you know. And then there's the procession." My eyes ran desperately around the barn, looking for some way out, some weapon, anything. But everything was meticulously organized, each tool in its place, out of my reach. "You don't need to be afraid," he said, coming closer. "I just want to get to know you better. We're a family now, aren't we? Father and daughter?" The way he said daughter caused me instant nausea. "You're not my father," I managed to mutter, my voice almost disappearing. "My father was Joseph Sanders." Something darkened in his eyes. "Your father is dead, girl. I'm the man of the house now, and you will respect me." That's when he came so close that I could feel his hot breath on my face. It smelled of coffee and tobacco. And then came the sound. That heavy breathing, panting, too close. Much too close. First on my face, then on my neck, when he leaned down to speak in my ear. "This will be our little secret, Janine. Your mother doesn't need to know. Nobody needs to know." What happened next, my mind blocked for many years. It's as if a veil had fallen over my memories. I remember fragments: the sound of his belt buckle, my back against the rough wood of the workbench, the smell of sweat mixed with machine oil, and that breathing. Always that heavy breathing in my ear, on my neck, as if he was sucking not just the air from the barn, but my very life. At some point, I simply disconnected. My mind separated from my body, fled to a place where that wasn't happening. I fixed my eyes on a crack in the barn ceiling, which formed a shape like a bird flying. I imagined I was that bird, free, soaring above the clouds, far from that barn, that man, that breathing. I don't know how long it lasted. But when it ended, when he finally moved away adjusting his clothes, I was in shock. I couldn't cry, scream, or move. I was frozen, as if every muscle in my body had forgotten how to function. "Fix yourself," he ordered, his voice now cold and pragmatic. "And remember, not a word about this. If you tell anyone, especially your mother, you'll destroy this family. She'll hate you for trying to separate us. Your brothers will go hungry again." "Do you want that? Do you want to be responsible for everyone's misfortune?" I nodded mechanically. No, I didn't want to destroy my family. I didn't want to see my mother suffer again. I didn't want my brothers to go hungry. "Good," he smiled, that smile that now deeply disgusted me. "You're a smart girl. Now go wash up and act naturally when your mother gets back. Remember, it's our secret." When he opened the bolt and the door swung open, the sunlight temporarily blinded me. The fresh air invaded my lungs as if I had spent hours underwater. I stumbled out of the barn, my legs barely supporting me. I went straight to the river, to the hidden place among the trees where we used to swim secretly. I entered the water clothes and all, scrubbing my skin until it was red, as if I could wash away what had happened. But I couldn't. That day marked the beginning of my nightmare. A nightmare that would repeat itself many times in the following years. Always with the same setting, the barn. Always with the same ritual, the excuse to take me there, the door closing, the bolt sliding, the darkness, and that panting breath that stole my air and my life. And the worst, always with the same silence afterward, because I never told. Not to my mother, not to my brothers, not to my friend Clarice. I carried that secret like a stone in my chest, a stone that grew each day, making it increasingly difficult to breathe. The years that followed were a long exercise in survival. From 13 to 16, I lived in two completely different worlds. The outside world, where I smiled, studied, helped my mother, and pretended everything was fine. And the inner world, dark and suffocating, where the barn and Arnold were the protagonists of my daily terror. Over time, Arnold developed a system. He always found ways to take me to the barn when there was no one around. Sometimes it was in the middle of the afternoon, when my mother went to the market or to visit a sick friend. Other times, very early in the morning, before others woke up. And there were Sundays, the terrible Sundays, when my mother and my brothers went to church and I, increasingly, invented excuses to stay home. I'm not feeling well. I have to finish a school assignment. I need to help with the embroidery that you promised to deliver tomorrow. Any excuse served, except the truth. Because the truth was that I knew what awaited me as soon as they crossed the gate. Arnold would appear at my bedroom door, his countenance transformed, and would say those words that froze me inside. "Come, Janine, I need your help in the barn." It was always the same. The silent walk to the back of the yard, the barn swallowing what little light was inside me, the bolt sliding, the door closing, and then that breathing. The sound that would haunt me for the rest of my life. The worst wasn't the moments inside the barn, as horrible as they were. The worst was the aftermath. It was having to go back to the house, sit at the table with him, hear my mother praise the good husband she had found, see my brothers respecting him as a father figure. It was carrying that rotten secret inside me, feeling it grow like a tumor, consuming my soul day after day. Gradually, I transformed. The cheerful and dreamy Janine gave way to a quiet, frightened girl with eyes always downcast. I stopped meeting with Clarice. I abandoned the dream of having a fabric store one day. My life was reduced to surviving one day after another, breathing as little as possible, occupying as little space as possible, as if I could become invisible. At school, my performance dropped drastically. Mrs. Olympia, who had always been proud of me, called my mother for a talk. "Something is happening with Janine," she said. "She's distant, doesn't participate in classes anymore, turns in incomplete assignments. Is everything okay at home?" "Of course it is," my mother replied, offended by the insinuation. "My husband is an exemplary man. He gave stability to our family. Janine is at that difficult age. You know how teenagers are." That's when I realized nobody would believe me, not even my mother. Arnold had built such a solid image of good stepfather, of respectable man, that my word, the word of a troubled teenager, would be worth nothing against his. The nightmares began to torment me every night. I dreamed I was locked in the barn, that the air was running out, that his breathing transformed into a monster that suffocated me. I woke up startled, bathed in cold sweat, unable to scream, because I had learned to suffer in silence. At this time, I began to develop physical symptoms of my suffering. A persistent cough that no syrup cured, frequent headaches, a constant shortness of breath, as if my lungs had forgotten how to function properly. My mother, worried, took me to the clinic, but doctors never found anything wrong. "It's nerves," they diagnosed. "Age problems. It will pass. But it didn't pass. On the contrary, it only got worse when Gerald, my oldest brother, decided to move to Lincoln. He had gotten a job at a river transport company and saw in the capital a chance to grow in life. I begged to go with him. "Take me with you, Gerald. I can work. I can study there. I can do anything." He laughed at my insistence. "What nonsense, Janine. You're only 16. Your place is here with Mother. I'll send money every month, and when I'm established, maybe you can visit me." Gerald's departure was like losing my last anchor. He was the only one who, even without knowing my secret, made me feel a little protected. With him gone, Arnold became even more daring, more frequent in his visits to the barn, more confident in his impunity. It was around this time that I tried to talk to my mother. Not directly about what happened. I didn't have the courage for that, but in a veiled way, testing the waters. We were alone in the kitchen, she preparing lunch, me helping to peel cassava. Arnold had gone out to resolve matters in town. "Mom," I began, my voice trembling, "have you ever felt afraid of Mr. Arnold?" She stopped what she was doing and looked at me surprised. "Afraid? Why would I be afraid of my own husband? What a strange question, Janine." I swallowed hard. "It's just that sometimes he seems different when you're not around." Her face hardened. "Different how? What are you insinuating, girl?" "Nothing, Mom. It's just that—" I hesitated, searching for words that wouldn't compromise me too much. "Sometimes he looks at me in a weird way. It makes me feel uncomfortable." She dropped the knife she was holding forcefully on the wooden board, the sound echoing through the kitchen. "Enough, Janine. I won't tolerate this kind of talk in my house. Arnold saved our family when we were in poverty, gave a roof, food, respect to all of us. And you come with these insinuations?" "But Mom, there's no but. You're growing up, becoming a young lady, and you're confusing things. Arnold is a decent man who treats you like a daughter. If he keeps an eye on you, it's just to ensure you don't go around behaving like certain girls your age, and be thankful for that." I felt as if I had been slapped. My own mother, the person who should protect me above all else, was choosing his side, without even hearing what I had to say. At that moment, something broke inside me, the last hope that someone could help me. That same night, Arnold came to my room. It was late. Everyone was already asleep. He opened the door without knocking, as he always did. But instead of taking me to the barn, he sat on the edge of my bed. His face was different, somber, threatening. "Your mother told me about your little chat today," he said, his voice low but filled with contained fury. "You've been making insinuations about me, haven't you? After everything I've done for you all." My entire body trembled. "I didn't say anything, Mr. Arnold. I was just—" "Shut up," he cut me off, grabbing my arm with such force that it left purple marks. "Listen well to what I'm going to tell you. If you open that filthy mouth of yours to speak ill of me again, it won't be just you who suffers the consequences. Your mother, your little brothers. Think about what could happen to them." He came closer, his breathing, that terrible breathing, invading my space. "And you know something. No one would believe you. No one. I'm a respected man in the community. You're nothing. A troubled girl, with poor grades at school who makes up stories. Who do you think people will believe? Me or you?" Silent tears ran down my face, but I didn't dare make a single sound. He smiled, satisfied with my terror. "Tomorrow," he said, rising, "we're going to have a special conversation in the barn, so you learn to respect your stepfather." When he left, I lay in the darkness, suffocating my sobs in the pillow. The threat loomed over me like a toxic cloud. What did he plan to do to me in the barn tomorrow? Something told me it would be worse than anything that had happened before. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't breathe properly, as if my lungs had become too small for the air I needed. The darkness of the room seemed like the same darkness of the barn, and in every corner I could feel his presence, hear that heavy breathing that haunted me. It was during that sleepless night, between silent tears and desperate thoughts, that I began to understand. As long as Arnold was breathing, I would never be free. He would never stop, and no one would help me. The idea started small, just a tiny point of weak light in the darkness of my mind. But over the hours, it grew, took shape, transformed into a plan. A risky, terrible plan that went against everything I had been raised to believe. But it was the only way out I could see. If Arnold used the barn as a weapon against me, maybe I could use the barn itself as my weapon against him. The next morning arrived with a deceptive calm. The sun rose lazily over the Missouri River, painting the sky in orange hues that in other times would have enchanted me. But on that day, I looked out the window and could only see shadows, even under the brightest light. At breakfast, Arnold was strangely silent, casting glances at me that only I understood. My mother, Olivia, and Eugene talked normally, oblivious to the storm that simmered beneath the tranquil surface of our breakfast table. For them, it was just another day. For me, it would be the day that changed everything. "I'll need Janine this afternoon," Arnold announced casually, spreading butter on a slice of bread. "There are some things in the barn I need to organize, and her delicate hands will help with the smaller items." I felt my stomach turn. There it was, the sentence pronounced in front of everyone, disguised as an innocent request. "But I had arranged to help Olivia with her embroidery," I tried, one last desperate effort. "The embroidery can wait," my mother intervened, smiling at her husband. "Your stepfather works so hard for us, the least we can do is help him when he needs it." Arnold's victorious smile pierced me like a knife. It was decided. There was no escape, or rather, there was only one. The one I had planned during the sleepless night, between tears and desperation. After breakfast, I waited for my mother and brothers to leave for their commitments. Arnold went to the town center, said he would return in the afternoon to organize the barn. I knew exactly what that meant. And for the first time, I didn't just feel fear. I felt a cold, calculating determination I had never experienced before. As soon as I was alone, I put my plan into action. I went to the small back room where we kept old things. Among dusty boxes, I found what I was looking for: a kerosene lamp that my father used on his night fishing trips. Beside it, an almost full can of fuel. My mother had kept everything after his death, unable to part with the memories. With trembling hands, I took the can and the lamp. I couldn't believe what I was about to do, but I also saw no other way out. It was him or me. And after years of letting me suffocate, it was his turn to feel what it was like to have the air stolen from his lungs. I walked to the barn, feeling each step as if I were in a dream, or rather a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. The barn was there, imposing, silent, keeping all the secrets of the darkest afternoons of my life. The door wasn't locked. Arnold left it open when he went out, confident that no one would dare enter his sacred territory. But on that day, I dared. I pushed the heavy door and entered the familiar half-light. The smell of wood, machine oil, and mold hit me like a slap, bringing memories that I forced myself to push away. The plan was simple, born of desperation and observation. The barn was the perfect place for an accident. The old wooden walls, the dried grain sacks in the corner, the bales of hay that Arnold used for repairs, everything there was highly flammable. And more importantly, the barn had only one door and two small windows with wire screens, one of them at the back, far from the view of the main house. I worked quickly, guided by fear and determination. I poured kerosene in the dustiest corners, near the burlap sacks and dry hay bales. I was careful not to leave visible traces of the liquid. I didn't set fire immediately. That would come later, when he was inside. I strategically positioned the lamp as if it had been accidentally left there. I stored the kerosene can in a place where no one would find it. Then, I returned to the house, took a bath, and dressed with studied simplicity. An ordinary girl, ready for another ordinary day. no one would suspect that inside me a storm was forming. In the afternoon, as promised, Arnold returned. He found me on the porch, pretending to read a school book. His smile was the same as always, that mixture of authority and sick desire that turned my stomach. "Ready to help me in the barn, Janine?" he asked, his voice heavy with insinuations that only I understood. I nodded in silence, avoiding his eyes. My heart was beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. My plan was ready, but one question haunted me. Would I have the courage to execute it? Would I be capable of doing something so extreme, even after everything he had done to me? We walked together to the barn, one last time. Each step was like walking to the gallows, but I didn't know who would be executed, him or my soul. The afternoon sun was beginning to lower, casting elongated shadows across the yard. The barn seemed larger, more threatening than ever. Arnold opened the door and gestured for me to enter first. As always, I obeyed. The interior was in the familiar half-light, exactly as I had left it hours before. The smell of kerosene was faint, disguised by the stronger aroma of wood and mold, imperceptible to those who weren't looking for it. I heard the familiar and terrible sound, the door closing, the bolt sliding. We were locked, isolated from the world. He turned to me, his face transformed into that mask of sick desire that I knew so well. "Now, Janine," he said, his voice low and threatening, "we're going to talk about your attempt to speak ill of me to your mother. You need to learn a lesson." That's when something inside me changed. A lifetime of fear and submission gave way to a fury I didn't know I possessed. I looked into his eyes for the first time in years, without looking away, without shrinking. "I'm not afraid of you," I said, my voice strangely firm. He laughed, surprised by my boldness. "Well, well, the kitten decided to show her claws? This will only make everything more interesting." He took a step toward me, but I didn't retreat as I always did. Instead, I walked calmly to where I had hidden the metal lighter that he himself kept in the barn to light his occasional cigarette. "What are you doing?" he asked, a touch of uncertainty in his voice for the first time. "I'm tired," I replied, turning the lighter between my fingers. "Tired of not being able to breathe. Tired of hearing your breathing in my ear, on my neck. Tired of feeling suffocated every day, every night." The confusion on his face gave way to anger. "Stop this nonsense and come here right now, or I'll have to come get you." Instead of obeying, I flicked the lighter. The small flame danced hypnotically. "Do you know what happens when we can't breathe, mister?" "Arnold? We try to find air, but we can't. It's like being underwater, drowning, but unable to rise to the surface. That's how I've felt since you entered our house, like I'm drowning day after day." He advanced, furious, but stopped when he saw that I was bringing the lighter close to one of the corners where the kerosene was concentrated, near a dry hay bale. "What do you think you're doing, you crazy girl?" he shouted, finally understanding my intention. "I'm making you feel what I feel. The lack of air, the suffocation. I don't know if it was courage or desperation, maybe both. But at that moment, I brought the flame close to the hay soaked in kerosene. It happened faster than I had imagined. The fire caught instantly, climbing the dried wooden wall as if it had a life of its own. Arnold shouted, trying to put out the flames with his bare hands, but it was too late. The fire spread rapidly, fueled by the fuel that I had strategically spread. Black smoke began to fill the barn, dense and suffocating, exactly as I had planned. While he fought against the advancing fire, I ran to the small window at the back. It was narrow, but I was thin enough to pass through it. With a strong push, I tore off the wire screen and squeezed myself out, falling to the ground on the other side with a dull thud. From inside the barn, I heard his screams, first of anger, then of fear, and finally of desperation. I heard him run to the door, shake the bolt, which now, with the intense heat, had probably jammed. I heard him cough violently as smoke filled his lungs. I stayed there, hidden among the trees that grew at the back of our property, trembling with fear, with adrenaline, with shock at what I had just done. The fire consumed the barn rapidly, flames rising to the sky like accusing fingers. The dark smoke formed a column visible from a distance. Arnold's screams grew weaker, interspersed with fits of coughing, until, finally, they ceased. The silence that followed was the most deafening sound I had ever heard in my life. Only then did I realize the magnitude of what I had done. I had taken a life. As monstrous as Arnold was, as much as he had destroyed my childhood and adolescence, I had crossed a line from which there was no return. I ran to the river and threw myself into the water, washing the soot from my face and clothes. I cried as I had never cried before, a cry that came from the depths of my soul. It wasn't regret, not exactly. It was more a recognition that, from that moment on, my life would never be the same. When I finally returned near the house, neighbors were already gathering, attracted by the fire. Someone had gone for help. My mother was there, screaming Arnold's name, trying to approach the burning barn, being held back by other people. I approached slowly, playing the role of the frightened girl who had gone for a walk and returned to find chaos. No one questioned. No one suspected. For everyone, it was a tragic accident, a fire caused by some carelessness, perhaps a cigarette not properly extinguished, perhaps the lamp tipped over. And as the flames consumed the barn and everything it represented, I felt, for the first time in years, that I could breathe deeply again. The air entered my lungs like a blessing, clean, fresh, liberating. The price of my freedom had been high, higher than any person should pay. But at that moment, watching the barn be reduced to ashes, I knew I had done the only thing I could to survive. The days that followed the fire were a blur of confusion and pain. Arnold's body was removed from the ruins, unrecognizable, consumed by fire. My mother entered a state of deep shock, alternating between crises of desperate crying and long periods of empty silence. Olivia and Eugene, disoriented by the sudden tragedy, tried to console our mother while dealing with their own pain. And me? I lived in a state of torpor, as if I were observing everything from afar, through a curtain of fog. During the day, I acted as expected of me, the mourning daughter, helping with funeral preparations, receiving condolences from neighbors with downcast eyes. At night, when I finally was alone, the weight of what I had done crushed me. It wasn't regret. I couldn't regret having put an end to my torment. It was something different, more complex. The awareness that I had taken a life, even if it was the life of my tormentor. The inquiry into the fire was brief. Accident, the authorities concluded. Probably a cigarette not properly extinguished, or the lamp that was found among the ruins. No one suspected the quiet 16-year-old girl with frightened eyes and a soft voice. Who could imagine that those delicate hands had poured kerosene and set fire to the barn? Who could guess the horrors I had endured in that same place for years on end? After the funeral, our financial situation became complicated again. Arnold left no will, but as he had no other living relatives, my mother inherited his small business. The problem was that she had no idea how to manage it. In a few months, debts began to accumulate, and the ghost of poverty returned to haunt our door. It was during this time that a letter from Gerald arrived from Lincoln. He had heard about the tragedy and offered help. "Come here," he wrote. "I got a better job at a larger company. I can help find work for you, Mom, and school for the younger ones. We'll start over together." My mother hesitated. Leaving Riverdale meant abandoning everything she knew, the house where she had lived with my father, the memories, good and bad, that she had built there. But the alternative was to face poverty again, perhaps worse than before. After weeks of indecision, she finally agreed. We would sell the house, Arnold's small business, and move to Lincoln. For me, it was the chance I had been waiting for, to leave behind the scene of my nightmare, the place where every corner reminded me of that heavy breathing and the sliding bolt. But destiny had other plans for me. 2 weeks before our planned move, I received an unexpected visit. I was alone at home, organizing the few things we would take to Lincoln, when I heard a knock at the door. It was Nancy Olson, a lady in her 60s whom I knew only by sight. She was a seamstress, lived alone in a small house on the other side of town, and rarely participated in community events. "May I come in, Janine?" she asked with a firm but gentle voice. "I need to talk to you." Hesitantly, I invited her in. I offered coffee, which she accepted with a smile. While I prepared the drink, I felt her eyes following me, as if she were studying me carefully. "Do you know why I'm here?" she finally asked, when we sat face to face at the kitchen table. "No, ma'am," I answered sincerely. She took a sip of coffee, observing me over the cup with eyes that seemed to see beyond my skin, to my soul. "I'm here because I recognize the look you carry," she said at last. "It's the same look I had when I was your age, the look of someone who has known hell and survived to tell the story." I felt my heart speed up. It was as if she could read my most secret thoughts. "I don't know what you're talking about," I tried to disguise, averting my eyes. "I know about the barn, Janine," she said, her voice now almost a whisper. "I know what happened there, and I know what you did." The blood froze in my veins. My mind was spinning frantically, trying to understand how she could know, who could have seen, if I would be denounced now, years later. I thought about denying, about feigning indignation, but something in her look, a mixture of understanding and compassion, stopped me. How do you know?" I managed to ask, my voice almost gone. "Because I saw," she answered simply. "My house is on that small hill across the river. From my window, I have a clear view of your yard. I saw when he took you to the barn, always with the same excuse. I saw how you went in one way and came out another. I recognized the signs because I went through something similar in my youth." Tears that I hadn't shed even at Arnold's funeral began to roll down my face. It was the first time someone recognized, even if indirectly, what I had suffered. "Why did you never say anything?" I asked, between sobs. "Why did you never help me?" A shadow of guilt passed over her wrinkled face. "I should have done something, it's true. But who would believe a lonely old woman against a respected man like Arnold? I tried once. I spoke to Father Oliver, insinuated that something wasn't right in your house. He reprimanded me for spreading malicious gossip about a good family." I wiped away the tears with the back of my hand. "And now? Did you come to denounce me?" She laughed, a short, dry laugh. "Denounce? No, girl. I came to offer you a way out." "What kind of way out?" "I know that you and your family are going to move to Lincoln, but I also know that what you carry inside you, what you did and what you suffered, will follow you wherever you go. Some ghosts cannot be left behind so easily." She paused, as if carefully choosing her next words. "I have a sister in Millbrook. A smaller, more remote town where no one knows your story. She has a fabric store and needs help. You once told your friend Clarice that you dreamed of having such a store, didn't you?" I widened my eyes, surprised that she even knew this intimate detail of my life. "I'm getting old," Mrs. Nancy continued. "I have no children. I was thinking of moving near my sister, too. We could go together. You would work in the store, learn the business. With time and dedication, perhaps one day the store could be yours." The proposal was so unexpected that I was speechless. It was exactly what I most desired, a complete, fresh start, away from everything and everyone that reminded me of my painful past. A chance to pursue my forgotten dream. But my mother, my brothers, I began, confused. "They are following their path to Lincoln with Gerald," said Mrs. Nancy kindly. "You can follow your own path now. You're 16, almost 17. At your age, many young women are already married, living their own lives. It wouldn't be so strange." She stretched her hand across the table and held mine, her fingers calloused from needle and thread, transmitting surprising strength. Think carefully, Janine. This could be your chance to really breathe again, to build a life of your own, without the shadows of the past haunting you at every corner. In the days that followed, I thought a lot about Mrs. Nancy's proposal. The idea of separating from my family caused me pain, but at the same time, I felt it was what I needed to do. Lincoln would just be another prison. There would be no barn, there would be no Arnold, but there would be the constant gaze of my mother, the whispers of neighbors who knew us, the weight of guilt that I carried. Talking to my mother was the hardest part. She didn't understand why I refused the security of being with family in Lincoln to follow a stranger to another town. "It's an opportunity, Mom," I explained, without being able to look into her eyes. "To learn a trade, to follow my own path." "Is it because of him?" she suddenly asked. "Because of Arnold?" The question caught me off guard. For a terrible moment, I thought she knew the truth, both about what he had done and about what I had done. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. She sighed deeply. "I always noticed how you changed after he came into our lives. How you distanced yourself. How you avoided being in the same room as him. I thought it was jealousy, that you resented him for trying to take your father's place. But now, after the accident, I wonder if there was something more that I didn't see." Tears silently streamed down her face, aged by suffering. It was the first time she showed any understanding, even if belated, of my torment. "It doesn't matter anymore, Mom," I said softly. "He's gone, and I need to move forward too." 2 weeks later, with my mother's reluctant blessing and tight hugs from my siblings, I left with Mrs. Nancy for Millbrook. I carried only a small suitcase with clothes and some personal belongings, and the invisible weight of memories that no baggage could contain. The journey was long and tiring, on dirt roads that wound between hills and crossed rivers on improvised ferries. But with each mile that took us away from Riverdale, I felt air entering my lungs more easily, as if a weight was being gradually removed from my chest. Millbrook was smaller than Riverdale, but had its own charm. Wide streets, simple but well-maintained houses, people who looked at me with curiosity, but without the weight of judgment or knowledge of my past. Mrs. Nancy's sister, Irene Olson, received me with a warm hug, as if I were a dear niece and not a stranger with an obscure past. The fabric store was on the main street, a cozy space full of colors and textures that immediately enchanted me. "Welcome to your new life, Janine," Mrs. Irene said, opening her arms to encompass the store. "Here you can be whoever you want to be. You can leave the past behind and look only to the future." And that's exactly what I did. In the months and years that followed, I immersed myself in work with fierce dedication. I learned everything about fabrics, about sewing, about customer service. Gradually, I earned the trust of the townspeople. I was no longer the girl from Riverdale with the frightened look, but the kind young woman from the fabric store. I maintained contact with my family through letters. My mother and brothers adapted well to life in Lincoln. Gerald married, had children. Olivia followed the same path. Eugene joined the military police. And my mother gradually found a peace that seemed impossible in the dark days after the fire. When Mrs. Irene passed away, 10 years after my arrival, she left the store to me in her will, as if I were really her niece and natural heir. At 26, I owned my own business exactly as I had dreamed as a girl. And that's how, step by step, breath after breath, I rebuilt my life from the ashes of the barn that had consumed my childhood and the man who had stolen my air. And so, my dear viewers, the years passed by. The fabric store prospered under my care. I expanded the space, hired assistants, diversified the products. Mrs. Nancy lived with us until she died at 82, peacefully in her bed, holding my hand. She was like a second mother to me, the person who extended her hand when I needed it most. My real mother stayed in Lincoln. In the early years, we would visit each other once a year. With time, the visits became rarer, not for lack of love, but because our lives followed different paths. She never married again. She passed away almost 20 years ago, at 75, surrounded by her other children and grandchildren. I went to the funeral, of course, and cried all the tears I had stored up, not just for the mother I had just lost, but for the girl I had been, for the stolen childhood, for what could have been and wasn't. My siblings went on with their lives. Gerald built a solid career at the transport company, had 4 children. Olivia married a merchant, had 3 children, divorced, married again. Eugene made a career in the military police, became a lieutenant, had 2 children. We keep in touch, though more by phone and messages than by personal visits. As for me, I also built my own family. At 28, I met Henry Ferguson, a history teacher who had come from Kansas City to work at the local school. He was a gentleman with kind eyes and hands that never made me feel fear. He was the first man I trusted after everything I'd been through. We dated for 2 years before marrying, enough time for me to be sure he was different from Arnold in every possible way. Our wedding was simple, in the small church of St. Lucy, right here in Millbrook. I had only one son, August, who is now 45 and lives in Kansas City with his family. He has 3 children, my dear grandchildren, Valerie, Lucas, and the little one, David, who is the joy of my old age with his 10 years and endless questions. Henry passed away 12 years ago from a sudden heart attack. It was a loss that left me adrift for some time. We had built a good life together, based on mutual respect and companionship. It took time to find myself again after he departed. Today, at 78, I live a quiet life filled with small joys. I sold the fabric store when I turned 65, but I keep a sewing machine at home and still do small jobs for friends and family. I live in the same house that I shared with Henry, a simple but cozy construction with a yard full of plants that I care for lovingly. My mornings begin early. I've always been one to wake with the birds, a habit I maintain to this day. I have my coffee on the porch, observing the day dawning over the rooftops of Millbrook. This town welcomed me when I was just a broken girl, gave me space to grow, to heal, to breathe again. I learned to love every street, every corner, every person who is part of my routine. I spend a few hours in the morning taking care of the house and plants. I have orchids, ferns, an apple tree that gives sweet fruits every year, a small bed of herbs that I use for teas and seasonings. Working with the earth connects me to something greater than myself, reminds me that life continues, that after winter always comes spring. In the afternoon, when the heat gives a reprieve, is when I meet with my friends. We have our group, as I told you before. It started small, just me, Nancy, and Irene, sitting on the porch of one house or another, sharing coffee and light conversation. Gradually, other ladies joined us. Zelma, who lost her husband young. Genevieve, who raised her grandchildren after her daughter passed away. Apollonia, who survived cancer, each with her story of pain and overcoming. It was on one of these afternoons, about 2 years ago, that we began to share our deeper stories. Stories that, like mine, carried shadows from the past, but also light of resistance and hope. I realized I wasn't alone in my struggles, that other women had also faced storms that seemed impossible to overcome. We talk about everything: joys, sorrows, fears, hopes. We talk about the children we raised, the loves we lived, the losses we endured. We laugh together, cry together, support each other. In this group of mature women, I found a new family, a sisterhood based not on blood, but on shared experiences. At nights, when I'm alone at home, sometimes I think about the past. Not with the terror I felt before, but with a kind of melancholic understanding. I think about the girl I was, what I had to do to survive. Sometimes I still wake up frightened, with the sound of that breathing echoing in my ears. But now I know it's just a ghost, that it can no longer hurt me. Time is a great healer, you know. It doesn't erase scars, but makes them less painful. I learned to live with my past without letting it define who I am today. I learned that surviving is, in itself, an act of courage and resistance. When my grandchildren visit me, which happens a few times a year, my house fills with life and noise. I tell them stories, not this story, of course, but others, lighter ones, from when their grandmother was young and worked with colorful fabrics. One day, perhaps, when they're older, I might share parts of my journey, so they know it's possible to survive the most severe storms and still find beauty in the world afterward. And so I live, one day at a time, breathing deeply the air of Millbrook, grateful for each dawn, for each sunset, for each conversation with my friends, for each hug from my grandchildren. Life has taught me its hardest lessons, but it has also shown me that there is always, always a path to light, even when everything seems too dark. My dear viewers who have accompanied me this far, this is the story of a girl who had her air stolen and of a woman who learned to breathe again. A story of pain, yes, but also of rebirth. If you're going through something similar, if you feel you can't breathe, that you're suffocating under the weight of a secret, of abuse, of a pain that seems endless, I want you to know you're not alone, just as I wasn't, even when I thought I was. Sometimes salvation comes from where we least expect. For me, it was Mrs. Nancy, a lady who silently observed from her window and one day found the courage to extend her hand. Perhaps for you, it's someone who is already in your life, or someone you have yet to meet. Keep your eyes and heart open to recognize when that help arrives. I learned that our traumas don't define who we are. They just shape the path we walk. Every difficult breath, every moment of despair, every silent tear, all this is part of our journey, but it is not our final destination. The barn of my nightmares turned to ashes many years ago, but the memories remained with me. With time, I learned that we don't need to erase the past to move forward. We just need to find a place for it inside us where it doesn't hurt so much, where it doesn't prevent us from breathing. When that door closed and the bolt slid, I ceased to exist. I dissociated, lost myself, suffocated. It took an extreme act for me to be able to breathe again. But life taught me that there are many forms of liberation. Today, when I share my experiences with other women who have also suffered, I feel that I'm releasing a little more of that weight, breathing a little deeper. That's why telling this story today, to you, is so important to me. It's one more step in my healing, even after so many years. And who knows, maybe it's the first step in the healing of someone who is watching me now. Each of us carries our own pains, our own barns, our own difficult breaths. But we also carry within us the strength to survive, to rebuild, to find beauty even after the greatest storms. If there's something my 78 years have taught me, it's that life is made of cycles. After the darkest night, the sun always rises. After the harshest winter, spring always comes. After the moments when air seems not to enter our lungs, there always comes that deep, liberating breath. My dear viewers who have come this far with me, on this story so difficult but so necessary, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Your subscriptions help me continue sharing these stories of overcoming that can touch other lives. When you click subscribe, you're lighting a flame of hope for someone who may be going through their own dark barn right now. Leave in the comments the word breathe so I know you watched until the end and understood the most important message of this story. Do it now, don't wait another minute. Your participation can help another person find the courage to seek help, to take the first step toward liberation. Thank you for listening to me, for breathing with me on this journey. See you soon with more stories of life, pain, and overcoming. And don't forget to let me know in the comments which town you're watching from. It makes me so happy to know where my viewers are from and when they take time from their day to watch grandparents' tales. On the night my father died, he whispered a terrible order to my brother while I stood there. She is yours now. 2 days later, the fire devoured everything, except the truth that only I carry in my scars. Hello, dear friends. What a joy to chat with you today. I'm Eleanor Hoffman, 78 years old, and I live here in Pine Creek, a small town in northern Montana. It's a tiny place, but cozy, full of good people and stories to tell. I settled here after many journeys through life, but that's a story I'll share with you a bit later. These days, I devote my time to my greatest passion, artisanal beekeeping. Yes, I'm a beekeeper grandma. I have 5 hives in my backyard, all painted different colors to help my little bees find their way home. I produce a wildflower honey that's known throughout the region. Folks around here always say my honey has healing properties, but I tell them the only medicine in it is the love I put into caring for my girls. That's what I call my bees. I started this activity when I moved here, going on 15 years this December. At the time, I was looking for something that would connect me with nature, something that would help heal old wounds. The bees taught me so much about new beginnings. They work together, protect each other, and create something sweet from flowers. It's like they show me every day that it's possible to transform even the bitterest experiences into something sweet. My little house is simple, but it's my haven of peace. On the front porch, I have an old-fashioned rocking chair made of hardwood, one of those that won't break even with the weight of years. That's where I usually sit on mild, sunny afternoons, with a cup of chamomile tea with honey, my own honey, of course, to watch the street activity. Inside, the kitchen with its wood-burning stove is where I spend most of my time, baking cakes and bread sweetened with honey from my bees. The walls are painted soft yellow, like morning sunshine, to chase away any sadness. The interesting thing about beekeeping is that it taught me not to be afraid. I, who had so much fear in life. Today I wear my special suit, my gloves, my smoker, and walk among them without fear. In the beginning, of course, I got stung a few times. I still have a little mark here on my chin from the first time I tried to harvest honey without complete protection. What a lesson that was. Now I respect their space, and they respect mine. It's a partnership, you understand. You know, my dear viewers, life sometimes puts us in situations that seem to have no way out. Moments when we have to choose between accepting cruelty or finding strength in places we didn't even know existed inside us. I found myself at such a crossroads when I was young, back in Willow Creek, another small town in rural Montana. It's a difficult story, but one I need to tell because it might help someone who's going through something similar. But before I continue, I'd like to ask a little favor. If you're enjoying listening to me, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps bring these stories of overcoming to more people. And you know what I love doing? Reading your comments. So tell me in the comments, which town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this video? Are you having your morning coffee, resting after lunch, or getting ready for bed? I always read all the comments and feel so happy knowing where you're from and how you're doing when you take a moment to listen to this grandma's stories. Let me know, okay? Let's create a chain of kindness. Now I'll go back in time, to my childhood, when I couldn't yet imagine what destiny had prepared for me. When the skies of Willow Creek still seemed cloudless, even though inside our house there were already shadows that I, as a little girl, didn't fully understand. I was born in 1947 in Willow Creek, a small town in rural Montana where time seemed to pass more slowly than in the rest of the world. Our house was away from the center, a large property with fields that extended as far as the eye could see. It was a wooden structure, one of those old ones, with floorboards that creaked with every step, large windows that rattled with the winter winds, and a dark basement that always gave me chills. My father, Arthur Hoffman, was what they called a man of respect in the region. Tall, with hair that had turned gray early in life, and large hands, calloused from working the land. He owned one of the largest properties in the area where he raised cattle and grew tobacco. He carried the German surname with pride and kept repeating that Hoffman blood is strong blood, as if our lineage was some kind of special nobility in those parts of Montana. Mother, Beatrice, was the opposite, petite, soft-spoken, always with a colorful scarf tied around her brown hair. She had been a teacher at the rural school before getting married, but father made her quit. "No wife of mine needs to work outside the home," he would say, as if it were an honor for her. I watched mother wither like a flower without water over the years. She passed away when I was only 12, from pneumonia that wasn't treated in time. I think, deep down, she was too tired to fight for her own life. There were 3 of us children. My older brother, Howard, who was 7 years older than me. My middle brother, Edward, who died as a child during a fever that swept through the region. And me, Eleanor, the youngest and only girl. Father never hid his disappointment at having a daughter after 2 sons. "What am I going to do with a girl in the family?" he would grumble, as if I were a mistake of nature. Our routine was marked by hard work and silence. We would wake up with the first crow of the rooster. Mother and I prepared breakfast, biscuits with homemade jam, country cheese, and strong black coffee, the kind that's so thick a spoon stands up in it. The men ate first, then went to the fields. I helped Mother with the house, learning from an early age to wash, cook, sew, make preserves. When she fell ill, I took over all the household chores at just 11 years old. Playtime was rare, but precious. On Sunday afternoons, after lunch, Father would take his sacred nap. That's when Edward and I, while he was still alive, would escape to the creek that ran through our property. We'd catch minnows with makeshift hooks, build little boats from leaves, make up stories. It was Edward who taught me to whistle like the robins and recognize animal tracks in the mud along the bank. When he died, at 8, I felt as if I had lost my only window to a more colorful world. Howard, my older brother, was always Father's mirror image. From a young age, he copied his gestures, his way of speaking, even the way he spat on the ground after chewing tobacco. While Edward protected me, Howard seemed to take pleasure in scaring me. He'd hide caterpillars in my drawers, pull my hair when no one was looking, push me when I walked near the well. "It's just a joke," he would say if I complained to Mother. But there was something in his eyes that frightened me, a shadow that grew with the passing years. School was my only refuge. It was 4 miles from our house, and I walked there every day with my cloth bag where I carried a notebook, a pencil, and my lunch, usually a slice of banana bread or a piece of bread with jam. The teacher, Miss Ingrid, was a woman of German descent like us, but with a sweetness that reminded me of how Mother was before her spirit broke. It was she who noticed I had a facility with numbers and letters. "This girl has a good head for studies," she said once to Father in one of the rare school meetings. "Study for what?" was his response. "To turn into a spinster with glasses like you? She needs to learn to be a good housewife to get a decent husband." I still remember Miss Ingrid's face turning red with embarrassment. After that, she began secretly lending me books. "Take them home, read them in hiding, and return them when you're done," she would whisper. That's how I discovered The Little Prince, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and other worlds that made me forget, for a few hours, the life that awaited me at home. When Mother died, our house became even darker. Father began to drink more, to talk less. Howard, already 19, assumed the role of man of the house alongside Father. And I, at 12, became the woman responsible for everything: cooking, washing, ironing, cleaning. My books were stored at the bottom of a drawer. My hands, which once held pencils, now only knew the broom handle, the pestle for grinding nuts, the cold water in the tub where I scrubbed clothes. It was during this time that I began to notice changes in the way Howard looked at me. It was no longer the look of a teasing brother. It was something different, something that made me cross my arms over my chest when he entered the same room as me. I began to lock the door to the room that had been Mother's and was now mine. Father noticed and removed the lock. "There's nothing to hide in this house," he said. It wasn't about hiding something. It was about protecting myself from something I didn't fully understand yet, but felt in the air, heavy like the weather before a storm. Visits to town were rare. Father would go once a month to sell cheese and buy what we needed: salt, sugar, fabric for clothes. Howard began to go with him. I would stay at home, alone with my thoughts and my chores. Sometimes, when I finished everything, I would climb onto the barn roof and watch the road that led away from there, imagining what it would be like to simply follow it and never return. But where would a 12, 13-year-old girl go, with no money, no one to turn to? There were signs of what was to come. Small signs that only now, so many years later, I can clearly recognize. The way Father and Howard would sometimes whisper, looking at me. The strange questions about when I would become a complete woman. Father's comment about how I was starting to look like Mother when she was young. These things didn't make sense to me at the time. They were just parts of my daily life, raindrops before the flood that would change my life forever. The winter of 1960 arrived with a force we hadn't seen in years in Willow Creek. The biting cold transformed the fields into white carpets of frost every morning. It was in this time of darkness and silence that my father fell ill. It started with a cough that wouldn't go away, then came the fever, difficulty breathing, weakness that prevented him from even getting out of bed. The town doctor, Dr. Richardson, came once, prescribed syrups and ointments, but shook his head in a way I immediately understood. There wasn't much to be done. I had just turned 13. I was still a child in years, but hard work and responsibilities had aged me inside. My brown hair fell down my back in a thick braid. My hands already had calluses from scrubbing clothes in the tub. And my eyes, which Mother said were the color of wild honey, seemed to have lost the sparkle of childhood. I was becoming a woman in a house without a mother, with an authoritarian father and a brother who looked at me in a way that made my stomach freeze. With Father's illness, which the doctor diagnosed as chest sickness, now I know it was tuberculosis, the atmosphere in the house changed. He, who had always been the center of power, was now confined to his room, coughing blood into handkerchiefs that I secretly washed in the creek, so the neighbors wouldn't know the severity of the situation. Fear of the disease kept the few visitors away. Even the community's pastor, Reverend Miller, only came once to give the last rites and stayed at the doorway, far from the bed. Howard, then 20, completely took over the family business. He would leave at dawn to tend the cattle and return at dusk, exhausted and increasingly taciturn. Sometimes I would catch him talking in a low voice with Father, interrupting when I entered the room with the tray of food or medicine. There were secrets between them, plans I wasn't supposed to know about. One night, when I went to bring the herbal tea for my father, I heard my name being mentioned. I stopped outside the partly open door, my heart racing. And Eleanor, what will become of her when you... Howard's voice hesitated. I'm thinking about that. I can't leave her loose out there, without direction. There's Jeb Klinger, from over at Aspen Ridge. He's looking for a young wife after his woman died in childbirth. I froze upon hearing this. Jeb Klinger was a man of almost 50, known for his brutality with animals and with the farm hands who worked on his property. He had 3 grown children and a permanently stern face. Jeb has means, continued my father, between coughing fits. He'll give a good price for the girl. Price. As if I were a heifer being traded. But Father... Howard's voice sounded strange. Don't you think Eleanor is too young to marry? And Jeb doesn't have a good reputation? And since when does that matter? A woman needs shelter and food. The rest she learns to endure, like your mother learned. I felt a knot in my throat. So that's what they were expecting for me? To be sold like merchandise to an old and violent man? To learn to endure? The tea on the tray I was holding trembled, spilling a few drops on the floor. But Father, what if... Howard seemed to hesitate. What if she stayed right here, on our land, with me? There was a silence that seemed to last an eternity. Finally, my father spoke, his voice lower. You mean, as your wife? I didn't hear the response, but the silence that followed was enough. I moved away from the door in silent steps, returned to the kitchen, and poured the tea down the sink. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the mug. A plan was being forged there, a plan that would decide my fate without my consent, without my voice. In the days that followed, I avoided being alone with Howard. I locked my door at night with a chair propped against the doorknob, since the lock had been removed. I slept with a large pair of scissors under my pillow, the ones I used to cut fabric. I wasn't entirely sure what I was arming myself against, but my instinct screamed for me to protect myself. Father got worse each day. His breathing became so difficult that the sound woke me during the night, even with my door closed. He barely ate, refused medicine, and the fever made him delirious for hours. During one of these nights of delirium, he called for Mother several times. For the first time, I saw tears in that hard man's eyes. "Beatrice," he called. "Forgive me. Forgive me." I don't know what he was asking forgiveness for, but that night I understood that even the hardest men carry weights on their conscience. A week later, his condition worsened so much that Howard went to fetch the doctor from town. Doctor Richardson came, examined Father, and with a sorrowful look, said it was a matter of days, perhaps hours. He taught me to give drops of laudanum to ease the pain, recommended keeping Father hydrated, and left, promising to return the next day. We never saw him again. A strong storm knocked down the bridge that connected our property to the main road. That night, the rain fell hard on the roof of our house. Lightning illuminated the room in ghostly flashes, and the thunder made the windows tremble. Father had a coughing fit so strong that blood sprayed onto the white sheet. Howard and I ran to the room. For a moment, our silent conflict was set aside due to the gravity of the situation. I cleaned Father's mouth with a damp cloth while Howard held his hand. My father's eyes, once so lively and authoritarian, were now opaque, losing focus. "Howard," he called, his voice so weak we had to lean in to hear. "Come closer, son." Howard moved closer, almost putting his ear to Father's lips. "The land. Don't sell the land," Father whispered. "It's the blood of the Hoffmans that's in it. 5 generations. I won't sell, Father. I'll take care of everything as you taught me." Father coughed once more, grabbed Howard's arm with surprising strength for someone on the brink of death. "And Eleanor." I froze upon hearing my name. I moved closer involuntarily, as if pulled by an invisible cord. "Eleanor. Take care of her. Don't let her go away. The Hoffman blood must continue." His voice became even lower, almost inaudible. "She is your responsibility now. Do whatever is necessary to keep the blood in the land." There was a long pause, during which only the sound of the rain and Father's labored breathing could be heard. Then, with a final effort, he pulled Howard even closer and whispered something I couldn't hear completely. Only fragments reached my ears. "Yours now, pure blood, a child." I saw Howard's eyes widen, then narrow. He nodded slowly. Father released his arm and let his hand fall heavily onto the bed. His eyes fixed on the ceiling, and with one last broken breath, he departed this world. We remained silent for a few seconds, only the sound of the storm outside filling the void. Then, as tradition dictated, I knelt beside the bed and began to pray the rosary that Mother had left me. Howard remained standing, motionless, looking at Father's body. There was something different in his eyes, a new and frightening determination. When I finished the prayers, I stood to close Father's eyes and cross his hands over his chest. That's when Howard spoke, his voice strangely calm. "Now it's just the 2 of us, Eleanor. You and me." Something in the way he said that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I mumbled that I needed to get the candles, that we should keep vigil over the body as tradition dictates. In the kitchen, while looking for the wax candles we kept for occasions like this, my mind was working frantically. What exactly had Father said to Howard? What did keeping the blood in the land mean? And why, despite the grief I should feel, what dominated me at that moment was a growing and suffocating fear. I returned to the room with the candles and lit them, placing them around the body. Howard remained in the same place, like a statue. When I looked up, I found his gaze fixed on me. It wasn't a look of grief, nor of solidarity in pain. It was a look of possession, of someone who had just received something they had desired for a long time. That night, as we kept vigil over my father's body, I understood with crystal clarity I needed to flee that house. And I needed to do it before Arthur Hoffman's body was placed in the land he loved so much. The 2 days that followed Father's death were like walking on thin ice. At any moment, I could sink into deadly freezing waters. Howard took over the preparations for the burial with a frightening efficiency. He sent the farmhand, Joe, to notify the town, hired the carpenter to make the coffin, decided that Father would be buried in the small area we used as a family cemetery, on top of the hill that overlooked our property. There already lay Mother and Edward, as well as the paternal grandparents I never knew. During this time, Howard barely spoke to me, but his eyes followed me everywhere. I felt his gaze on my back as I washed the dishes, as I swept the floor, as I hung clothes on the line. At night, he stayed up late in the living room, drinking whiskey straight from the bottle, staring at the fire crackling in the wood stove. I retired early, pushed the chair against the door, and slept with the scissors even more firmly gripped under my pillow. On the day of the burial, the sky dawned clear, as if the storm of the last few days had never happened. Some families from the area came to pay their last respects. Reverend Miller performed a simple service, speaking about how Arthur Hoffman had been a hard-working man, a pillar of the community, an example of determination. I heard those words as if they were speaking of a stranger, not the man who raised me with an iron fist and who, on his deathbed, had transformed me into a kind of property to be inherited. Miss Ingrid, my former teacher, came to the funeral. She approached me while the men were throwing the last shovelfuls of dirt on the coffin and discreetly squeezed my hand. "If you need anything, Eleanor, my home is always open," she whispered. I nodded, grateful for the offer, but knowing it would be difficult to accept it. Miss Ingrid's house was in town, almost 5 miles away, and Howard would hardly let me go there alone now. After the burial, people came to our house, as was the custom. The women brought cakes, breads, and pies. The men, bottles of whiskey, food and drink to comfort the bereaved, so the tradition said. I saw Howard talking quietly with Jeb Klinger, the man Father had mentioned as a possible husband for me. Jeb had small, aggressive eyes that evaluated me like someone examining an animal for sale. I shuddered and moved away, going to the kitchen to help with the food and drinks. It was there, among basins of potato salad and platters of sausage, that I heard the conversation between 2 women who didn't see me behind the pantry door. "Did you see the way Howard looks at his sister? It's not a brotherly look, that's for sure." "Good heavens, Olivia, don't say such a thing." I'm saying what I saw, and I'm not the only one who noticed. Gerald, my husband, also commented. He said when we visited Arthur last week, he caught Howard spying on the girl through the crack in the door while she was changing her father's poultice. "Shut your mouth, woman. If Howard hears such talk..." That's exactly why I'm worried. Now that Arthur is gone, who will protect that girl? They moved away, taking with them the tray of bread they had come to fetch. I stood there, paralyzed, with confirmation of what my heart already knew. It wasn't just my impression. Others had noticed too. The danger was real. When the last of the visitors left around 6 in the afternoon, Howard locked the front door and put the key in his pants pocket. Then he went to the cabinet where Father kept the liquor and took a new bottle of whiskey. He stayed in the living room, sitting in what had been Father's armchair, drinking in silence. "Go to bed, Eleanor," he ordered when he saw me standing in the kitchen doorway. "We have a lot of work tomorrow. Things are going to change around here." I nodded and withdrew, my heart hammering against my ribs. As I passed through the kitchen, I discreetly picked up some slices of bread and a piece of cheese, wrapped them in a dish towel, and hid them under my bed. I didn't know what would happen, but my instinct told me to be prepared. Like on previous nights, I placed the chair against the door and lay down fully dressed, the scissors firm in my hand. I tried to sleep, but every creak of the old house made me open my eyes. Outside, the sky was clear, and the full moon illuminated the yard with its silver light. I must have dozed off at some point, because I woke with a start to the sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway. The doorknob of my room turned, but the chair prevented it from opening. Then I heard Howard's voice, slurred from drinking. "Eleanor, open this door." I remained silent, pretending not to hear. "Eleanor!" He knocked harder. "I know you're awake. Open this door now, or I'll break it down." Still, I didn't answer. I held the scissors more tightly and curled up against the headboard of the bed. "Is that how it's going to be?" His voice had a dangerous tone now. "Well, know that this house is mine now. Everything here is mine, including you. It was Father's last wish, and you know it." Silent tears streamed down my face as I listened to those horrible words. "I'll give you until tomorrow to understand how things work now. If you don't open this door willingly, you'll open it by force." I heard his footsteps moving away, then the sound of the front door opening and closing. Through my bedroom window, I saw Howard walking toward the barn, probably to get more to drink. That was my chance. I quickly got up, grabbed my small bundle of food, and opened the window. The drop wasn't big, maybe 6 feet to the ground. Without thinking twice, I swung my legs over the windowsill and jumped, landing on the grass with a dull thud. For an instant, I crouched there, waiting to see if anyone had heard. Nothing, just the distant hooting of an owl and the sound of the wind in the trees. I began to run toward the road that led to town. If I could reach Miss Ingrid's house. But there were almost 5 miles to go on dark and unfamiliar dirt roads. And if Howard noticed I was gone and came looking for me with the truck, he would catch up to me in minutes. I needed to think of another solution. That's when I remembered the basement. That dark, damp place that always gave me chills, but that I knew like the back of my hand because that's where we stored preserved food for the winter. The jams, the cured cheeses, the smoked sausages. There was a small external door, almost completely covered by a vine, that Father had forgotten about years ago. I discovered it when I was little, playing hide-and-seek with Edward. No one else knew about that entrance. I changed direction and ran to the back of the house. The door was there, partially hidden by vegetation. With some effort, I managed to open it and slip into the dark, damp interior. The smell of mildew and earth was strong, but I didn't care. Groping in the dark, I found a corner where I curled up, behind some old shelves. I stayed there for hours, trembling with cold and fear. I heard when Howard returned, when he shouted my name throughout the house, when he started cursing and breaking things up there. He was furious, and that only increased my terror. At some point in the early morning, the sounds ceased. He had probably passed out from drinking too much. That's when I noticed something strange. A different smell in the air, something sweet and aggressive at the same time. It came from near the basement stairs, where the old gas furnace Father had installed years ago to heat the house in winter was located. I approached carefully and realized the problem. There was a leak in the main gas line. Small, but constant. Father always said he needed to fix it, but never found the time. The smell was accumulating in the closed basement without proper ventilation. It was at this moment that a terrible idea began to form in my mind. An idea born of desperation and survival instinct. The gas. If I increased the leak, if Howard came looking for me in the basement, a spark would be enough. No, I couldn't. It was wrong. It was a sin. But then I remembered the words I heard on the night of Father's death. Howard's veiled threat. The fate that awaited me if I did nothing. If I were a good, obedient girl, as I had been taught to be, I would end up like Mother, A shadow, a voiceless creature, used and discarded, or worse. With trembling hands, I approached the piping and, using the scissors I still carried, began to loosen the metal connection. I didn't break it completely, just enough for the leak to increase. The smell grew stronger almost immediately. I retreated to my hiding place, my heart beating so hard I thought it might give me away. Now it was a matter of waiting for Howard to wake up, to come looking for me, to come down to the basement, waiting for destiny, or God, or the devil I no longer knew, to decide what would happen next. Hours later, I heard movement in the house. It was morning, from what I could tell by the sliver of light entering through a small ventilation window. Howard had awakened and, from the noise, was furious. I heard objects being thrown, doors being violently opened. "Eleanor! Where did you get to, you little wretch? You're going to regret this!" His screams were getting closer and closer until I heard the basement door being opened upstairs. The light from a lantern illuminated the stairs. "I know you're down there, Eleanor. No use hiding. This house is mine. You are mine now. That's what Father decided." His heavy footsteps came down the wooden stairs. The smell of gas was strong, but he seemed not to notice, blinded by rage and the effects of the previous night's drinking. The lantern swung in his hand, casting ghostly shadows on the damp walls. I curled up even more in my hiding place, praying for the first time in a long time. Not for Howard's salvation, but for my own. For forgiveness for what I knew was about to happen. "Eleanor." His voice was closer. The lantern now illuminated the center of the basement. "Come out now, or it will be worse for you." That's when he felt it. I saw his face change expression when he finally noticed the strong smell of gas. His eyes widened in belated understanding. He looked at the lantern in his hand, then at the pipe from which the gas was now visibly escaping. I don't know if it was instinct or panic, but Howard did exactly what he shouldn't have. He raised the lantern to better see the leak. What followed was like lightning, a deafening explosion, a wave of intense heat, the sound of wood splintering, and then complete darkness. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I opened my eyes, the world was just pain and darkness. My lungs burned with each breath, my face and arms burned as if they were still in flames. There was a constant ringing in my ears that muffled all other sounds. I tried to move, but something heavy was pressing on my legs, a beam or part of the floor that had collapsed with the explosion. Gradually, my eyes adjusted to the dimness. The basement was unrecognizable. Where once there were organized shelves with jams and preserves, now there were only debris and rubble. The fire had consumed part of the structure, but seemed to have extinguished itself, smothered by the collapse. A beam of light came from above. Part of the kitchen floor had given way, opening a hole in the basement ceiling. And then I saw it. A few yards away from me, partially buried under the rubble, was Howard's body. Even in the dim light, I could see that he was dead. His eyes, which had terrified me so much, were open, fixed, and empty. His right hand, the one holding the lantern, had been completely mangled by the explosion. A mixture of horror and relief invaded me. Horror at what had happened, at what I had done. Relief because I was alive, because the nightmare was over, or at least that part of it. With superhuman effort, I managed to drag myself away from the rubble. Every movement was pure agony. My hands were raw, my face throbbed with pain, and I suspected some ribs were broken from the difficulty in breathing. But I was alive. That was all that mattered at that moment. I dragged myself to the small side door through which I had entered hours earlier. It was blocked by debris, but not completely. With the last remnants of strength I had left, I pushed the debris just enough to pass my thin, injured body to the outside. The afternoon sun temporarily blinded me. When my eyes adjusted, I saw the extent of the destruction. Part of the house had collapsed. Smoke was still coming from the broken windows. The smell of burnt wood and something else, something terrible I preferred not to identify, permeated the air. I managed to crawl to the well, where I drank water directly from the edge, ignoring the searing pain that the movement caused. The cold water brought some relief to my parched throat and helped clean a bit of the blood and soot from my face and hands. It was then that I heard it. A distant sound of an engine approaching on the road. Someone was coming. My first instinct was to hide, but then I realized I needed help. I was seriously injured, alone, and if I didn't receive aid, I would probably die right there. An old, dusty car appeared around the bend in the road. I recognized Joe's vehicle, our farmhand who lived in a small house a few miles away. He was accompanied by his wife, Martha. When they saw me, bloodied and staggering near the well, they stopped abruptly. Martha was the first to jump out of the car, running toward me. "My God in heaven, child! What happened here?" I tried to speak, but my voice came out hoarse, almost inaudible. The smoke had damaged my throat. "The house exploded. Howard!" Joe was already examining the rubble, shocked by the destruction. "The gas furnace. Leak," I managed to murmur before darkness enveloped me again. I woke up hours later in the hospital in Riverdale, the larger town closest to Willow Creek. My body was wrapped in bandages, an IV dripped into my arm, and the pain, though still present, was dulled by some strong medication. A nurse with a gentle face noticed I had awakened and approached the bed. "Easy, honey. You're safe now. I'm Nurse Ruth." "Howard," I tried to ask, my voice still a hoarse whisper. "Your brother didn't survive, unfortunately. The men who went there after Joe brought you found his body in the basement. Seems it was a gas explosion, from what we understand. A tragedy, so soon after losing your father." I closed my eyes, feigning a pain that was more emotional than physical. I didn't want her to see my relief, my secret. In the days that followed, I was questioned several times about the accident. By the doctor, by Sheriff Barnes, who came from the county seat, by neighbors who came to visit. I told the same story. I was hiding in the basement because I was afraid to stay alone in the big house after Father's death. Howard had gone to look for me. The gas heating system had an old leak that Father always put off fixing. Howard didn't notice the smell when he went down with the lit lantern. No one questioned it. Why would they? It was a tragic accident, but an explainable one. Gas accidents weren't uncommon in those days, especially in old houses with poorly maintained systems. And everyone knew that Arthur Hoffman wasn't a man who gave priority to house repairs when there was field work to be done. A week later, when I could speak a little better, I received a visit from Reverend Miller. He sat beside my bed, looking with compassion at my still bandaged face. "Eleanor, we need to talk about your future. You have no living relatives left as far as we know. Your father's property, well, legally it's now yours, since Howard is also gone. But you're much too young to manage it alone." I nodded, not knowing what to say. "Miss Ingrid, your former teacher, has offered to take care of you until you come of age. You could live with her in town, finish your studies. Meanwhile, we could lease the land to Jeb Klinger, who has already expressed interest. The money would be held for you until you're old enough to decide what you want to do." Jeb Klinger, the man Father wanted to buy me as a wife. The idea of him touching the Hoffman lands, harvesting what my father and my ancestors had planted, filled me with revulsion. But I had no choice. Or did I? "No," I said, my voice still hoarse, but determined. "I don't want to go back to Willow Creek. I don't want the land. I want to leave here, start over somewhere else." Reverend Miller seemed surprised. "But Eleanor, that land has been in your family for generations. Your father always spoke with such pride about—" "My father is dead," I interrupted, with more force than I intended. "Howard is dead. I don't want anything more from that place. Sell everything, give the money to the church or to whoever needs it. I just want to leave." The Reverend looked at me for a long time, as if trying to decipher something in my face, half hidden by the bandages. "Are you sure about this, child? It's a very big decision for someone so young." I'm sure, Reverend, that house, that land, only brings me memories I want to forget. I didn't mention the true memories I wanted to leave behind. My father's whisper on his deathbed, Howard's possessive look, the decision I made that fateful night in the basement. Those were mine to carry, alone. Reverend Miller eventually agreed. He knew a family in Oakwood, the Beckers, who were looking for a young woman to help with housework and take care of their young children. They were good, religious people, and would welcome me well. I could start a new life there, away from the shadows of Willow Creek. When I was discharged from the hospital, 3 weeks later, it was all decided. The Hoffman property would be sold, part of the money would be used to pay my medical expenses, and the rest would be held until I came of age. I would go to Oakwood to live with the Beckers, with the promise that I could continue my studies in my spare time. The night before leaving, alone in the small hospital room, I touched the bandages that still covered part of my face and arms. The wounds were healing, the doctor had said, but I would have scars for the rest of my life, scars that would forever remind me of what happened in that basement. "You'll carry these marks forever," said Nurse Ruth as she changed my dressings for the last time. "But remember that they are marks of survival, not defeat." Survival. Yes, that's what those scars meant. I had survived. I had escaped. The price was high, higher than any 13-year-old girl should have to pay. But I was alive and free. The next morning, with a small suitcase containing the few clothes that Miss Ingrid had brought for me, I boarded the bus to Oakwood. I didn't look back when the vehicle departed. I didn't want to see for the last time the fields of Willow Creek, the mountains that framed the horizon, the cemetery on the hill where now 3 generations of Hoffmans rested. That part of my life was over. What lay ahead, I didn't know. But there was one certainty in my heart. No one else would decide my fate for me. Never again. Oakwood, 1960. I arrived in that town without knowing a single soul, with still fresh scars on my body and soul, and with the Hoffman name weighing on my shoulders like a curse. The Becker family greeted me at the small bus station, Mr. Albert, Mrs. Helen, and the 3 young children, George, 8 years old, Hannah, 6, and little Paul, only 3. I remember the first meeting as if it were yesterday. Me, getting off the dusty bus with my small suitcase of clothes, my face still partially covered by bandages. Mrs. Helen, a robust blonde woman, coming toward me with a genuinely welcoming smile. Mr. Albert, more reserved, observing from a distance, probably wondering what kind of work he could expect from such an injured girl. The children looking at me curiously, especially little Paul, who asked out loud, "Mommy, why is the lady all wrapped up like a present?" The Beckers were of German descent, like my family, but there was a fundamental difference. In that house, there was human warmth. Mrs. Helen was strict about household chores and the children's discipline, but she also knew how to show affection, especially in the evening when she gathered everyone to hear stories around the wood stove. Mr. Albert worked at the town's lumber mill and was rarely home during the day, but when he returned, he always brought small surprises for the children. A candy, a different fruit, a simple wooden toy he had carved himself. My work consisted of helping Mrs. Helen with household chores and looking after the children while she dedicated herself to sewing, which was her supplementary source of income. It wasn't heavy work compared to what I did in Willow Creek, and the children, despite their boundless energy, were sweet and obedient. In the first few months, I spoke little. The wounds in my throat, caused by smoke inhalation, still bothered me, and the local doctor had recommended vocal rest. But the truth is that I didn't know what to say, how to behave. Part of me still expected to be treated with the harshness I was accustomed to be reprimanded for every small mistake, to have my space invaded, my will ignored. It took time to understand that life could be different. When the bandages on my face were finally removed, 3 months after my arrival, I faced the mirror with apprehension. The reflection showed a girl with reddish marks that ran down the right side of her forehead to her cheek and part of her neck. It wasn't as terrible as I feared. The doctor in Riverdale had done an exceptional job. But still, it was a permanent reminder of what had happened. "They are marks of courage," said Mrs. Helen, standing behind me, seeing my reaction in the mirror. "Don't be ashamed of them." She didn't know the complete story, of course. No one knew except me. To the world, I was just an orphan survivor of a tragic accident. But somehow, I felt that Mrs. Helen understood there was more to the story, even without knowing the details. Perhaps it was the intuition of a woman who, like many others, carried her own silent secrets and pains. As promised, I was able to resume my studies. I attended school at night after my work with the children. Many students looked curiously at my scars, and some whispered behind my back, but I had developed armor against this kind of cruel curiosity. Nothing could be worse than what I had already faced. It was at school that I met Helena, a young teacher who had recently moved from the city to Oakwood. She noticed my interest in books, the way I devoured any reading material that fell into my hands. One day, after class, she called me over. "Eleanor, you like to read, don't you?" I nodded, still shy with adults who weren't the Beckers. "I have a small library at home, books I brought from the city. Would you like to come one day and borrow some?" That invitation changed my life in ways I couldn't imagine. Helena's house was small but welcoming, full of books and ideas. She lived alone, something rare for a woman at that time, especially in a small town. Her husband had died in the war, she told me, and since then she had decided to live off her own work without depending on anyone. "People talk, of course," she said with a resigned smile. "A young widow, living alone, working. It gives them something to gossip about. But I've learned that life is too short to live it according to others' expectations." Those words resonated with me. Wasn't that exactly what I had decided in the Riverdale hospital? Never again to let others decide my fate? Helena became my mentor, my friend, and eventually, my savior. She saw something in me that I didn't even see myself. Potential. Not just for studies, but for an independent and fulfilling life. "You're intelligent, Eleanor. You have a quick mind and a determination that few people possess. You can't spend the rest of your life as a domestic helper, as good as the Beckers are." When I turned 16, in 1963, Helena made me a proposal. She was moving again, this time to Millfield, where she would take over as principal of a school. She wanted me to go with her, to work as an assistant in the school office during the day and study at night to complete my normal course. Afterward, if I wanted, I could become a teacher too. It was a golden opportunity, but also a dilemma. The Beckers had been good to me. The children, especially, had become attached. And I to them. The idea of leaving them caused a pain I didn't expect to feel. "Think carefully," said Mrs. Helen when I told her about the proposal. "It's an opportunity that doesn't come twice in life." To my surprise, she and Mr. Albert supported me completely. They understood, they said, that I deserved more from life than just being a domestic helper. They promised we would keep in touch, that the children could visit me during vacations, that I would always have a place to return to on special dates. That was the first time since Mother's death that I felt what it was like to have a real family, one that supports you and wants the best for you, even when it means letting you go. In March 1964, I left for Millfield with Helena. The city was much larger and busier than Oakwood, with its steep streets and the strong presence of Italian immigrants among the older residents. At first, I felt lost and insecure. The scars on my face, which no longer attracted so much attention in Oakwood, where everyone knew my story, or the version they believed to be true, again became a reason for curious looks and indiscreet questions. "Ignore them," Helena would say. "Small people worry about small things." Working at the school was initially a challenge. I had to deal with parents, teachers, students, official documents. but Helena guided me with patience, and soon I was mastering all the administrative tasks. At night, I studied diligently. Books became my best friends, windows to worlds I never imagined existed. It was in Millfield that I began to reflect more deeply on my past. As my horizons expanded, as I met different people and diverse stories, I began to see my own experience in a new light. What happened in the basement in Willow Creek wasn't just an act of desperate self-defense. It was a break in a perverse cycle that could have continued for generations. In 1967, at 20, I completed the normal course and became a teacher. Helena, proud as a mother, gave me a small gold brooch in the shape of an open book, which I still treasure. I began teaching at the same school where I worked, now as Helena's colleague, and no longer her assistant. It was a strange and wonderful feeling. Me, Eleanor, the girl who almost didn't have a chance to study, now teaching others. My life finally seemed to have found its path. I had a job I loved, a small apartment I rented near the school, friends, and the constant and loving presence of Helena. Occasionally, I visited the Beckers in Oakwood, amazed at how much the children grew with each visit. George was now a young man, Hannah a young lady, and Paul, the little one, now a clever boy who loved when I told him stories. But destiny had other plans for me. In 1970, Helena fell ill, a fulminant cancer that consumed her in just a few months. In her hospital bed, holding my hand with hers, already so fragile, she made me promise that I would continue living fully. Don't close yourself off from the world, Eleanor. You've had too many losses. Don't let this be another reason to build walls around yourself. When Helena passed away, I felt as if part of me had gone with her. It was like losing a mother for the second time. At the funeral, as I watched the coffin being lowered into the earth, I swore to myself that I would honor her memory by living the life she had helped me build. A few months later, I received an unexpected letter. Helena had left a will, and in it, to my complete surprise, she had left me a small inheritance, a house in Pine Creek, which had belonged to her parents. It was a modest property with a generous piece of land in a small town I barely knew. "I don't know why I'm buying this house," she said in the letter she left with the will. "Perhaps it's a whim of a woman growing old alone. But something tells me that one day you will need a place like this, a place of your own, far from painful memories, but close enough to your roots not to forget where you came from." I visited the house for the first time on an autumn Sunday. It was a simple wooden structure, in need of repairs, but solid in its foundations. The surrounding land was spacious, with fruit trees and a small creek running at the back. I stayed at the only inn in town, talking with the local residents, trying to understand why Helena had chosen this specific place to buy a property she herself never used. It was during this visit that I met Ernest, a local beekeeper who tended hives around the town. He was helping repair the roof of the inn when he saw me. "You must be the new owner of the Miller house," he said, coming down from the ladder and taking off his hat in a respectful gesture. "I'm Ernest Zimmerman. Pleased to meet you." Ernest was a middle-aged man, soft-spoken, with hands calloused from work. A widower for many years, he lived alone in a small farmhouse where he cultivated his bees. We talked for hours that day, and he offered to show me around the area. During the tour, he took me to see his hives, and for the first time, I saw up close the fascinating world of bees. "They are extraordinary creatures," he explained, as he showed me an open hive protected only by a thin screen. "They live for the common good, each with its role, and they produce something sweet from what they collect from flowers. There's a lesson there, don't you think?" I returned to Millfield with a formed idea. I would sell my small apartment and move to Pine Creek. I would continue teaching if there was a vacancy at the local school, but I would also learn about beekeeping. Something about that work deeply attracted me, perhaps the idea of creating life and sweetness from what nature offered. The next few months were of preparation. I requested a transfer to the Pine Creek School, sold my apartment, organized the move. Ernest became my guide in this transition, helping me plan the renovation of the house and understand the basics of bee breeding. In January 1971, at 24, I moved permanently to the house Helena had left me. In the years that followed, I divided my time between teaching at the local school and learning beekeeping. Ernest was a patient mentor, teaching me all the secrets of bees, how to set up the hives, how to care for the queens, how to harvest honey without harming the colony. Our friendship grew over the years, transforming into something deeper. It wasn't a youthful and overwhelming passion, but a tranquil affection based on mutual respect and companionship. Ernest never asked about my scars, although I knew he must have been curious. He respected my silences, my moments of introspection, my space. In 1975, we married in a simple ceremony attended only by the Beckers, who came especially from Oakwood, and a few friends from Pine Creek. We didn't have children, a conscious choice of mine that Ernest respected without questioning. I think, deep down, he understood that my fear of repeating patterns was deeply rooted in me. During the 30 years we spent together, we built a quiet life based on honest work and respect. My bees became my passion, especially after my retirement from school in 1990. With more time available, I expanded the apiary to 5 hives and began producing honey on a larger scale, selling to the local cooperative. Ernest passed away in 2005, at 77, peacefully in his sleep. It was a profound loss, but different from the previous ones. There was a peace in knowing that we had a full life together, that we loved each other in the best way we could, that we respected each other until the end. Now, at 78, I live alone in the same house that Helena left me. My bees continue to be my company and my livelihood. The scars on my face have softened with time, but they're still there, a daily reminder of where I came from and the price I paid for my freedom. What happened in that basement in Willow Creek was never completely forgotten. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, smelling the gas, hearing the roar of the explosion. But I've learned to live with these memories, to accept them as part of what brought me here. The frightened girl who loosened that gas pipe 65 years ago is at peace now, knowing that, in the end, she built something good and sweet from the ashes of her past. Like my bees, I transformed the bitter into honey. Today, at 78, I lead a peaceful life here in Pine Creek. My routine begins early, with the sunrise. Old habits never die, and this one of waking up with the first light of day came from childhood on the farm, when Father got us out of bed, even before the rooster crowed. The difference is that now I wake up because I want to, not because I'm forced to. My breakfast is simple: a piece of homemade bread with honey from my bees, a glass of milk, and sometimes an orange picked from the tree. I eat on the porch, watching the birds that come to eat the seeds I scatter every morning in the feeder Ernest built so many years ago. It's a way to start the day in communion with nature, thankful for another dawn. After breakfast, I put on my special coverall, gloves, and protective veil and go to visit my girls, as I lovingly call my bees. I have 5 hives scattered around the property, each painted a different color: blue, yellow, green, pink, and white. The bees recognize the colors and thus know which home to return to after collecting nectar. It's delicate work that requires patience and respect. I learned from Ernest to never make sudden movements near them, to always use the smoker to calm them before opening a hive, to recognize the signs of when a colony is healthy or needs special care. Each hive is a small universe with its own dynamics and personality. The honey I produce is known in the region for its unique flavor. The orange blossoms and eucalyptus I have on the property give it a special aroma that many loyal customers immediately recognize. I don't produce in large quantities, just enough to sell at the farmers market that happens on Saturdays in the central square of Pine Creek, and to gift to friends and neighbors. The income from the honey supplements my teacher's retirement. It's not much, but it's enough for my simple life. I've never been one for luxuries or extravagances. Perhaps because I grew up with so little, I learned to value small things, simple pleasures, a new book, a hot cup of tea on cold days, the smell of wet earth after the rain. My house remains basically the same as Helena left it to me, with some improvements that Ernest and I made over the years. The exterior walls were painted light yellow, sun color, as I like to say. Inside, it's a cozy place, with antique furniture that I restored myself, another skill I acquired throughout life. The living room has a bookshelf full of books, my most precious treasure. The kitchen, with its wood-burning stove that I still use on colder days, is where I spend a good part of my time, preparing preserves, sweets, and breads for the week. The room that was Ernest's and mine still has the double bed, even though I now sleep alone. In a way, I still feel his presence there, especially on stormy nights, when the wind whistles through the cracks in the window. Sometimes, I wake up in the middle of the night and, for a fleeting moment, forget that he's gone. I stretch my hand to his side of the bed, finding only emptiness. The pain of absence never completely disappears, but I've learned to live with it, like an old companion. I have few close friends here in town, but they are true. Mrs. Evelyn, my fence neighbor, comes to have tea with me almost every afternoon. She's 82 and has an enviable memory. She knows stories of all the families in the region and tells them with a sharp humor that always makes me laugh. The Baxter couple, Teresa and Oliver, owners of the corner grocery store, always keep the best fruits and vegetables for me. And there's young Tim, a former student who is now a teacher at the same school where I taught. He visits me frequently, asking for advice on how to deal with the more difficult students. Once a month, I receive a visit from George Becker's grandson, Daniel. He studies agriculture at the State University and became interested in beekeeping. He comes to learn from me the secrets I learned from Ernest and that now I pass on. It's gratifying to see how knowledge crosses generations, like an invisible thread that connects us through time. On summer nights, I like to sit on the porch and look at the stars, trying to identify the constellations that Ernest taught me. The Big Dipper, Orion's Belt, Scorpio, each has its story, its meaning. Sometimes when the sky is particularly clear, I think of Helena, of how she saved me from that dark future that seemed inevitable after what happened in Willow Creek. I think about how a single person can completely change the course of a life. The scars on my face have softened with time, but they're still there. They no longer bother me as before. They are part of my story, marks of the journey I've traveled. When the neighborhood children ask me what happened, I simply say that I survived a fire when I was young. It's true, after all, although it's only part of the truth. The complete truth is something I carry with me, a secret I never fully shared with anyone, not even with Ernest. He knew something traumatic had happened in my past, but respected my silence. Perhaps he guessed, perhaps not. What matters is that he accepted me as I was, with my visible and invisible scars. If there's a lesson I've learned in all these years, it's that life rarely follows the path we plan, but always offers us opportunities for new beginnings. Like my bees, which renew the cycle of life each spring, producing sweetness from the nectar of flowers, we too can transform our bitterest experiences into something valuable. And so I go on living, day by day, grateful for each sunrise, for each sunset, for each honey harvest, for each good memory I keep in my heart. The frightened girl from Willow Creek has been gone for a long time. In her place, there's a woman who learned that true strength is not in controlling others, but in having the courage to follow her own path. My dears, sitting here on my porch in Pine Creek, looking at the colorful hives and feeling the gentle October breeze on my face, I think of everything I've lived through. I think of the frightened girl I was, in the dark basement that almost swallowed me, of the scars I carry on my body and soul. And I think of what I've discovered through so many seasons. I discovered that evil doesn't have the last word. No matter how dark the night, no matter how closed the doors seem, there's always a sliver of light, always a way. Sometimes that way is dangerous, tortuous, and leaves us with marks we carry forever. But it's worth moving forward, always worth it. I learned that the true prison is not the walls that surround us, but the fear that paralyzes us. That night in Willow Creek, when I loosened the gas pipe, my hands were trembling. Not just from the danger of what I was doing, but from the weight of the choice I was making. A choice that would shape the rest of my existence. A choice between accepting the horrible destiny my own father had traced for me or risking everything to own my own path. I carry the weight of that night. I don't speak of it with pride or lightness. Life is sacred, even the life of those who harm us. But I also learned that my life was equally sacred, equally worthy of being defended. And that's what I did. I defended my right to exist, to breathe, to dream. For a long time, I confused survival with life. I thought it was enough to be breathing, to have a roof, food on the table. It was Helena who taught me that truly living is much more. It's making choices for yourself. It's loving and being loved without conditions. It's building something that makes sense to your heart. It was Ernest who showed me that trusting again is possible, that not all men carry the shadow of my father and my brother. And it was my bees that taught me the greatest lesson of all, that sweetness can be born from darkness. That even in the coldest days, when winter seems like it will never end, it's worth storing the honey, preparing the hive, believing in the next spring. When I look back, I see that everything I went through shaped me, but didn't define me. The scars on my face remind me every day that I survived the impossible, that I chose to live, even when it would have been easier to give up. And if I could do that, you can too, my dear one who is listening to me. If you're in a situation where you feel trapped, controlled, diminished, know that there is a way out. It may not seem so, it may be hidden, but it exists. Seek help. A teacher, as Helena was for me, a trusted neighbor, a distant relative, someone who can be your support point until you can stand firm on your own feet. And remember, you don't need to carry anyone's weight. You are not responsible for others' choices, only for your own. And you deserve a life that is yours, entirely yours. Before I finish, I'd like to ask a favor. If this story touched your heart, if somehow what I lived and learned made sense to you, please subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and leave in the comments the word courage. Because that's what I needed to find that night in the basement, and that's what guided me through the 65 years that followed. Courage to face the truth, no matter how hard it is. Courage to start over, even when it seems impossible. Courage to love again, even after so much hatred. Do this now. Don't wait even one more minute. Life is too precious to be wasted. Every second counts. From my hive to your heart, with all the honey that life, despite everything, allowed me to produce.